Hello and welcome to From Panels to Pictures. This is a special episode for the Comic Crushes film and TV show. I'm joined by Keith Isles from Home Media Minefield. Hi, Keith.
Hey, how you doing? All right.
I'm good. It's great to see you, man. We haven't kind of really spoken in a few weeks, so I've been watching your videos though on the Home Media Minefield channel, which everyone can subscribe to. There'll be a link in the description there if you want to do that. It's a really good channel, all about the complexities of physical home media, Blu-ray, DVD, 4K, that sort of thing. Although, sorry, you do focus more on the Blu-ray and 4K end of things rather than DVD. Have you done any DVDs yet, Keith?
I have actually. Yeah, I did one on the original Star Wars trilogy, but I mean the original trilogy.
Yeah, right.
Can't get anymore, and I was like, well, you can. That's the plus, but the minus is it's on DVD and it's from a Laserdisc transfer, so it's actually not an amazing picture or audio quality, but if you want that treasured original cut of the three films, the original release of the three films, the non-special edition versions, they are available. So yes, if you want to know more about that, please check that out on the channel. I think it's called the original trilogy. Yes, it does exist.
I actually have so many Star Wars box sets and sets that I've cobbled together sitting on the shelf above me because of the different cuts. I probably should just let it go at some point, but you know, we can't really. Keith's channel will help you kind of decide which are the best versions to pick as well. And he does lots of unboxings and things like that. Definitely worth checking out. Today, though, speaking of the sort of Star Wars era of blockbuster entertainment, we are going to be discussing the Richard Lester cut. I have to specify that the Richard Lester cut of Superman 2. It's the 40th anniversary this year. Yet another way in which I'm reminded how old I really am. Superman 2 is probably one of the first three comic book movies ever made, or at least American comic book movies ever made. Of course, you have the original Superman the movie and Flash Gordon as well, and now this. So there's been quite a few films this year hitting that sort of 40-year mark. So it's been interesting to kind of flash back and watch a lot of that stuff. And it was certainly interesting watching this. So Keith, do you remember seeing this for the first time?
Oh, I do, because sadly I am that old, as you said on the thing. But yes, I mean, I was a kid when this came out. And yeah, you know, I've got very fond memories of it, actually. This one I didn't see at the cinema. I saw this one on home video, which, you know, I'm forever grateful of growing up in the home video era, because, you know, I managed to catch lots of films that I wouldn't have otherwise seen. So, yes, I saw this on home video, loved it, owned it on multiple versions since. And yeah, I have a huge amount of love for you know, the Superman franchise with Christopher Reeve, even though obviously that they vary somewhat in quality, it's fair to say, but I know we're focusing on the second film today.
We are indeed focusing on the second one. Actually, one day we should probably do the third and fourth. Now, I mean, seeing it on home video, I presume this was a number of years after its release, because back then, like back in '81, there wasn't a home video market as far as I know. I think the home video market came like 1 or 2 years later.
I was going to say I would estimate, and again, it's, you know, nothing. You don't keep. Never used to keep notes and stuff back then, like nowadays. So it's hard to pinpoint exactly when. But yes, I was lucky enough to grow up with us having a you know, a VHS home video player. For most of what I can remember, my childhood. It served two purposes for us. It meant, there were 4 channels of television back then, and it meant that if I wanted to watch something there were 2 things on at the same time, simultaneous broadcast, we could of course record one and watch the other. So brilliant. But it also meant I could record stuff and watch them over and over and over and over again. But also, there was the video library. And I think it can't have been too long after Superman 2 that I saw it on video. I mean, it was probably a couple of years afterwards, but it's hard to sort of remember. But yes, long-winded answer to your question. But
no, that's great. That's great. It's fascinating stuff. I mean, I think I saw this. I mean, I can't recall how I first saw it, but I think it was television. So it would have been probably ITV in the sort of early 80s. The sort of TV version. I don't know if there's a longer cut of Super. I mean, obviously we know about the Donna cut, which we will mention in brief shortly. But if there's another version of Superman 2, the way there was with Superman the movie.
Apparently there is. There is talk of someday perhaps seeing a home media release because of the success of a few years back. They did a home media release of the extended 3-hour cut of Superman the movie, which was one that was only ever shown on television, and they went through a restoration process and that was released. Whether or not, I mean, Superman 2 wasn't, to my knowledge, I'm not sure I've seen it, but it wasn't massively extended. There were a few extra scenes like they used to do for some of those TV releases in the States, but I don't think it was as extensive as the differences to Superman the movie, to the best of my knowledge anyway.
And it's worth kind of mentioning this just in brief before we really dive into the movie, because this would actually be something that would probably be interesting for your channel at some point. That the arena of TV cuts offers a kind of real plethora of undiscovered gems. Now there are a ton of different cuts, as far as I know, for a bunch of different films. I mean, Halloween, we've obviously seen. I didn't realize there's also a television cut of Halloween 2, which I think is due out soon from Scream Factory or Shout Factory or one of those. There are alternate cuts of films like The Insider, Michael Mann's film The Insider, which to my great kind of annoyance, I've never been able to track down. I would love to see that.
Good movie,
There's been a bunch of TV cuts for a lot of stuff. Lethal Weapon, whenever that was shown on TV in recent years, that would be not so much a TV cut, but it would be the director's cut with more scenes thrown in. So there's been a number of films like that, and I really wish there'd be more of a move to kind of making that stuff available.
Yes.
But
it was a Star Trek the motion picture is another one that springs to mind. It basically, it was kind of these TV cuts. I mean, in some respects they were cut, meaning any violence or profanity or anything that was deemed not suitable for general television audiences were actually cut from the film, so removed from the film. But also, in a lot of cases, they were designed to fill up a particular time slot with commercials, etc. So what they would do is they would actually add scenes to make up for some of the cuts. They would actually add scenes, and they would do it to sort of pad out the runtime so that they could effectively make an evening event of this thing and have all of the benefits of the commercial breaks and advertising throughout it. But yes, it was a thing that was quite sort of vogue in the late 70s through to the late 80s, and it's less so nowadays with the consumption models that we've got.
The most famous one that I know of, which I've seen a sort of version of, but has not been released. I really wish they'd release it. Is The Godfather, which was done as the complete novel for television, which is extensively re-edited. So it starts in Italy in the sort of 1900s and ends, and plays all the scenes in The Godfather 2 in chronological order. And then you get Godfather 1, and then you get, the rest of the stuff from Godfather 2, and includes bonus material.
Yeah, that was actually released on VHS back in the day.
Which, again, I have up here somewhere.
Yeah, it was called The Godfather Legacy, and you're absolutely right. Basically, Francis Coppola re-edited it into, as you said, chronological order. But at the time, this was only the first 2 films, because Godfather 3 hadn't been released at that point. So it was essentially a chronological cut with extra scenes of the first 2 films. And as I said, that was available.
I do have to kind of correct you there. The television cut is even longer, because there's still more stuff, but apparently it renders the film it just takes some stuff slightly out of order where it shouldn't be, and it was kind of done, as you say, just to fill the runtime, spread out over 2 nights. So even that legacy cut is not quite as long. And again, I'd love to see this stuff redone, rematted for the proper format, because I believe a lot of the TV stuff was done at a TV aspect ratio.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the reason why we don't really get more of these. Because I'm like you, I would love to see more of this stuff. In fact, some of them I haven't even seen. But what tends to happen is, if they are released at all, they're usually put on the Blu-ray or the DVD or whatever as deleted scenes or alternative scenes in a section. And the main reason for that is because, obviously, if they were to incorporate them into the film, they would need to remaster them and sort out the aspect ratio and clean up the sound and all of that stuff. So there's always a bit of extra work to be done on that, which I guess back in the day, when they would sort of add these scenes into a TV edition, it was back when it was broadcast in that 4:3 mono sound thing, where it would be somewhat less noticeable. But if you saw it like today on a high def in a high def format, you would definitely notice the differences in quality. And of course, that, as with all things, equals somebody to be hired to do it. So therefore, money, expense in doing it. And I guess it's sort of a payoff as to whether or not that's actually going to sell and make its money back, in home media. But yeah, so it's a big discussion, actually.
Sorry, I'm taking us off on a tangent. But it does lead us nicely into the fact that, of course, we are dealing with a variant version of Superman 2 in itself. So Richard Donner was originally hired to shoot 2 movies, cock a hoop at being paid $1 million, but then realised, of course, that that meant he would have to shoot 2 films back to back. And during the shooting, where I think the differences between him and the Salkinds became so contentious, he either walked or was fired. I've heard it reported both ways, and never completed Superman 2. Now, my understanding is that if you see Gene Hackman in Superman 2, this version, the Richard Lester cut, you are looking at scenes directed by Richard Donner, because apparently Hackman would not do anything that was directed by Lester. Also, Marlon Brando had the same clause in his contract, or asked for the same clause to be put in his contract. So any scenes you see with Brando, which actually gets replaced by Susanna York in this version.
He does,
yeah. So he kind of opted out of doing any scenes for Superman 2 once Donner was gone. Richard Lester, as a director, a fine director who directed a lot of the Beatles films, and he's probably most known for those, but also directed the Three Musketeers and the Four Musketeers. Also shot back to back in the same way that Superman 1 and 2 were. And the Salkinds producing again. So quite a known director. There is a fantastic book by Steven Soderbergh, which is a book length interview with Richard Lester, but also a diary of Steven Soderbergh working on various films for other people and his own movies. That's definitely worth tracking down, where he talks about his career and talks about Superman 2 somewhat. There isn't a lot. I think it was an unhappy period for Lester, as well as Donner, and for all involved, really. Now, in looking at the Superman movies, the first two in particular, and especially as you look at longer and longer cuts, I find they've become tonally really a roller coaster.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's anywhere that's more evident than Superman 2 as directed by Richard Lester, because one of the things I found about it is that it just, especially looking at it now, I mean, it's just a wild ride in terms of tone. Like it really does go for a lot more comedy beats than really you think would ever be present in a Superman film. And I'm thinking especially of like the early scenes where Clark Kent is walking into the Daily Planet office, and he kind of does the James Bond thing with his hat, which is kind of almost anti Clark Kent in a way, and like it was just such a bizarre watch. How did you find it, Keith?
Yeah,
Tonally?
I mean, okay, I mean, obviously there are, depending which commentaries and which special features and whatever, and whose side of the story you hear, you're absolutely right, massively conflicting stories about what exactly went on. Richard Donner, who we recently lost, sadly, the world lost that. There is no doubt, you cannot take away the influence that he had on this genre and these movies. That has to be respected, whatever happens. He was the one who made us believe a man could fly. He was instrumental in the casting for the film, which, let's be honest, Christopher Reeve was, again, a sad loss to this world, was the absolute embodiment of both Superman and Clark Kent, and actually made them different people, which was not done at that point, or hadn't been done up to that point. And there was a lot of work put into this film. Superman the movie is so important, and it's funny because even though it came out the year after Star Wars, and everybody talks about how, of course, important Star Wars was to the film industry, you have to remember that Superman 1 and 2 was made at the same time as Star Wars was being made. So other than hiring John Williams to do the music, which obviously was another genius move there, but in terms of what this film did for the film industry and the legacy and all that, it stands on its own also. For this is as influential to the superhero genre of movies as Star Wars was for the sci-fi genre. And okay, I know there's some crossover, but here's the thing. There's a lot, particularly in view of what happens nowadays, where you get different directors working on films, and you get to see the original vision and all of this sort of thing. And there are loads of people that say, obviously the Donner cut, which I know we're not going to focus on today, but for whatever reasons, they say that is far superior to the Richard Lester cut, etc. And as now I'm, as an adult that understands filmmaking, has been to film school, and has studied films for most of my life, and has a particular passion for this series of films. Of course, I can see the tonal differences that you've mentioned, etc. However, I want to be really clear in saying here, I am not one to Richard Lester bash, okay? Because
no,
when I was a kid, this film, without knowing without having the sort of eye to the craft to be able to spot those things in the same way as I can now, I loved this film. In fact, as a kid, this is probably quite controversial to say, but as a kid, I actually, in some respects, preferred this film to the first one, because this was the one where all the action was happening, and
yeah.
So in many respects, I really like this. Richard Donner as a director, and in terms of his body of work, I'm a much bigger fan of than I am Richard Lester, for sure. But I do not want to sort of, as I said, take anything away from Richard Lester's contributions here. He was put in a difficult position, I think, because I think he originally came on to be a liaison between the Solkinds and the other producers on the film and Richard Donner, because they'd got to a point where they literally weren't speaking to each other, and he was kind of a go-between, a sort of consultant and whatever. And of course, he ended up having to sort of retool the film, add his part of it to get obviously his name in the credits as director and all this, and had to do something I guess one could say was quite difficult in some respects. So and I in his parts of the film, I don't hate, some people say, all the Donner stuff great and the Richard Lester stuff is there's a lot of stupidity in it, slapstick stuff that I don't like. And I think when you see Superman 3, that is the real Richard Lester Superman film, because obviously he was able to fully helm that one, whereas this is kind of a hybrid film. And yes, you can see the different tones and the different style, but that's not to say that everything he did was awful and everything that that Donner did was brilliant. I actually think the theatrical cut of this film works just fine, and the Donner cut is problematic because of the stuff Richard Donner didn't film. It's a compromise to use quite a bit of Richard Lester's work in it as well as his own. And there were scenes that obviously weren't even shot and filmed, like the infamous hotel scene and the gun, which they have to use rehearsal and audition material for. So it's nice that exists as an alternate cut, but it's far from perfect, and that isn't anybody's fault. That's just the way history happened. So sorry, I'm waffling now.
No, not at all. This is great. This is great. I mean, it's an interesting film because one, Superman as a whole, especially those first two films, really are kind of templates for what would become really rampant in the sort of 80s and 90s, which is the packaging idea of, you're just picking, you're going, okay, insert Oscar-winning actor here and here and here, and insert Oscar-winning composer there and Oscar-winning writer there, and, you've got a hit. We've packaged together a hit. And it kind of doesn't matter about the rest almost, because what they're building is a kind of, I don't know, mishmash of success. Now, I'm not saying they didn't care about the film. I genuinely think the Solkinds did. They really, I think they genuinely cared about the character. But I think their first thought was, this will make money, rather than, this is something we passionately want to do.
Completely.
This will make money, and that's fine. Sometimes that can be a perfectly good motivator, and I think that can still drive people to do excellent work in film. I'm not going to knock the capitalist drive of movies, because the capitalist drive of movies is what's brought us most of the films that we love. But I think that it is a shame that things broke down, as you say. I would like to have seen Donna's versions of a lot of those scenes fully realised. But yeah, Richard Lester is a terrific director. You know, he managed to helm the Musketeer movies, which I think were done before this.
Yes, they were. Yeah, yeah, that's kind of how he was. I believe they were anyway. I'm certain they were. No, I mean, you know, Richard Lester's sensibilities are different. I think his understanding of the Superman character was clearly different than Donna's. And you know, the tone and take on that is quite apparent when you know what you're looking for, if that makes sense. As I said, when I was a kid, I didn't necessarily pick up on it. I knew something was a bit different. You know, I knew the score sounded slightly different, for example, even though the themes were the same. And
actually, yes, who did the score for this?
Well, Ken Thorne. You see, again, there's conflicting stories here as well, because one camp say that because the Solkinds cut the budget, they couldn't afford John Williams to come back, and therefore they hired Ken Thorne, who always worked with Richard Lester anyway, and obviously he composed some good stuff as well for the bits of film. But of course, they still own the rights to the actual themes and everything, so they were still able to use all the John Williams themes within it, which is great, thank God. So that's one story, is it was a budgetary thing. Another story you hear is that John Williams actually, a little bit like the Gene Hackman story, you know, decided to decline coming back when because of what had happened with Richard Donner. So again, there's two stories out there. Who really knows what the situation was? But yes, I mean, you know, there were differences. Obviously, some of the visual effects in the second film aren't quite up to par as the first film. You know, there are things like that.
Sorry, please.
No, I was just going to say, Margot Kidder looks quite different in the Richard Lester stuff than she does. You know, she's actually got a different hairstyle, like a fringe, and you know, it doesn't quite match up. So there are a lot of things that you can notice sort of when you're looking for it. But as I said, as a 9-year-old kid, or however old I was at the time, you know, a 10-year-old boy in me, kind of really enjoyed this film and loved it and saw it as a good sequel to Superman the movie. And the thing with again, I'm sorry, I won't linger on the Donner cut, but the thing that spoils the Donner cut, if you like, is it's almost like they needed to go back and change the ending of Superman the movie so that the Donner cut of Superman 2 makes more sense, because essentially we just get a repetition of the conclusion from the first film, which was never the intention. The intention was that the first film would end on a cliffhanger, essentially. So when he pushes one of the nukes up into space and it explodes, it frees the trio from the Phantom Zone, and they head towards Earth, and that was supposed to be the end of the film. But of course, when all this happened, they needed to make a released version of, you know, Superman the movie. So essentially, they you know, retooled what was going to be the ending of Superman 2 to be the ending of Superman the movie, and then of course completely restructured it for you know, Superman 2, the theatrical cut, which Richard Lester did, and that's why we get the Eiffel Tower with the lift, with the plutonium bomb and all of that stuff.
I really like the Eiffel Tower sequence.
Yeah, I
actually quite like it. I think it's a nice little beginning and a great way to kind of get around that, you know, thing of how do you free the villains.
Yeah.
I think the trouble with Superman 2 as it stands, Richard Lester's version, is that it is just a series of instances and it doesn't feel like a narrative whole. And in fact, now you have two films that don't really feel like a narrative whole, but it does feel like just a series of comic skits with a bit of action in between. And I didn't realize until I watched it again here, like last week, just how kind of cheap it all looks. And you know, the New York stuff is obviously clearly shot in England with a bunch of English actors pretending to be New Yorkers. All the stuff that seems to be set in the sort of deep south in America, again, is clearly shot elsewhere with a bunch of English actors pretending to be. Or in some case, I think in some cases they did actually get American actors. Also, it introduces some baffling new stuff, like the in fact, in both versions, Zod seems to have some sort of telekinetic power, which I don't get. Just as I know this is kind of sliding into nerdism.
No. It's funny with me. There are things that I actually like in the Richard Lester stuff, and then there's things that I absolutely loathe in the Richard Lester stuff. So you know, like all of the slapsticky stuff that we get in New York, I really don't like. You know, the guy's wig blowing off and the ice cream, you know, going into the other person's face, and the dude on the roller skates, and the guy in the phone box having the conversation while it's being blown along, and all of that stupid stuff really doesn't fit. And of course, the stuff in the Fortress of Solitude, where suddenly, you know, they're able to do this sort of disappearing charades game, and you know, Superman's got like a cellophane thing that he throws from his the logo, the crest on his chest, and you know, all of that weird stuff. And it's like, what the hell is that? It's like, you know, do they understand you know, Superman's powers? Because this is all weird. But
in itself, the whole kind of depowering chamber of Superman, which is an interesting thing. I mean, look, you watch this and then jump forward and watch Spider-Man 2, and you're, you know, with the Spider-Man No More stuff, it's you know, it's not entirely dissimilar. The only real difference being is that the Spider-Man No More stuff is kind of driven by a sort of depressive attitude, whereas I find the stuff in Superman 2 isn't. It's driven by a lot of positivity. Like, he wants to go off and have this sort of love life with Lois Lane, and
which I never got as a kid at all. When I was a kid, I was like, "What's he doing? What's he doing? What an idiot! What's he doing?" But you know, and again, you mentioned Spider-Man 2, which I happen to think is an amazing film. You know, Sam Raimi's second Spider-Man movie is one of the best superhero movies out there. But that's a whole nother discussion, I know. But no, but you know, I made a point of watching Richard Lester's Superman 2 and the Donner cut back to back, and you know that there are some things that I would argue, and again, it's you know, I know a lot of this stuff. You know, a lot of the Fortress of Solitude stuff was filmed by Donner anyway, but then there were some reshoots that Lester came in and did, and I'd argue that some of it actually works a little better. And what I mean when I say that is, in the Lester cut of this, when Kal-El is explaining to Lois about, you know, his journey and whatever, and how the fortress got constructed, he actually does pull out the crystal that was always in the Kent barn, you know, in his spaceship, and said, you know, this called me there and all this, and handed it to her for her to look at, right? So that when he does depower and the console explodes, obviously that crystal isn't in the crystals that explode, right? So later when he comes back, it's there on the snow where she sat, where Lois sat, and she almost like sort of sat on it, but you know, sat. So that kind of almost, to me, trying to intellectualize all of this superhero stuff, kind of makes a little bit more sense than, of course, we get Brando in the Donner version, which is fantastic, and it is obviously Brando. You know, Jor-El, you know, restores his power and gives him a second chance, and all of this sort of thing. But you know, one could argue that logically, that works actually better in some ways. Yeah. The other thing I will say is sorry, I will shut up in a minute. But the one other thing I did want to say is because obviously Christopher Reeve and Margot Kidder had to do a lot of these scenes again when it was retooled for Superman 2. And of course, Hackman, you can tell that he wasn't involved in that. And of course, Brando was absent. Like you said, they brought Susanna York back as Lara and whatever. But the scene where Lois, finds out that Clark and Superman are the same person, and also the controversial scene at the end with the memory wiping kiss that everybody frowns upon a lot. But in terms of acting, there's some really nice performances from Reeve and Kidder in those scenes, and you have to remember those are scenes that Lester directed. So it's really complicated. It's really complicated. I
think what Lester did was embrace of what he felt was the absurdity of comic books, and I've got to say, at the time, comic books would have been fairly absurd because you were still 4 or 5 years away from the kind of real birth of the modern age, which kind of starts around 86 with Dark Knight Returns and things like that. In terms of comics, you're still 4 or 5 years away from that, so you were still in this sort of kind of I don't want to say naive, because the writers of comics would have not been naive, but a slightly more innocent looking time in terms of comics. It doesn't mean there wasn't dark stuff there. There really was. But
I agree. We're talking about the mainstream here, where the mainstream, and of course you're right, there were writers and artists that were way ahead of their time with comic books and having important social messages and all of that sort of thing. But the general consensus around that time, I mean, from what we've learned from history, because we were just kids, but the general consensus in those days was that a lot of this comic book superhero stuff was just for kids, right? It wasn't. So it was kind of poppy throwaway stuff for kids, adventures for kids. And you're absolutely right, because that does channel into the film, and you can see the different sensibilities of the directors, because you're absolutely right. Richard Lester leans into the comic booky absurdness of it, whereas Richard Donner was all about the verisimilitude, as he used to keep saying, and real.
In a way, it's what makes Lester the perfect director for this sort of material, because his pop sensibility was there. He'd been directing the Beatles for a few years, and you could not get more pop than the Beatles at the time. So I think there's a lot of good points to it. I can see why it sort of then. I mean, it didn't even really. You can't say it was a disappointing film in terms of box office, because the next one was 1983. Am I right?
Yeah, that's right.
So it's only a couple of years after.
It was good enough to spawn a sequel and a spin-off, because you got Supergirl as well off the back of this.
Yeah.
So
again, a strangely bizarre film, which I think we should talk about at length at some point.
Oh, definitely. But it's one of those franchises that I look at. If you look at the Superman Christopher Reeve era of that series of films. After the first two, in my opinion, they are somewhat problematic. They have some elements, but if you're looking at within that continuity, or lack of in some cases, the rest of the series is for me problematic, and always has been, even when I was a kid. But these first two films, and even in this cut of the film, I've still got a enormous amount of love and respect for. I remember as a kid with the videotape, I used to love the beginning of this, where you would get, obviously not played by John Williams, but you'd get the John Williams score by Ken Thorne in this, but you would essentially get a beginning title sequence, it would be the story so far, previously on Superman, and you'd get the sort of condensed version of Superman the movie bringing you right up to date. And I used to love that. I used to play that over and over.
I'm trying to think if that's been done since. I don't think it has. I mean, obviously you get the front crawl in Star Wars, but I don't think it's been done since in that way. I mean, I'm happy to be corrected. If anyone knows if that sort of style had been applied to anything else, superhero film or not, leave us a comment below.
I'm sure it's probably been done since, but I'm not so sure it had been done prior to this, unless it had been done.
Absolutely,
serialized television or something. But I used to love that. I actually used to really enjoy that part. And then, like you said, leading into the stuff at the Daily Planet prior to the Eiffel Tower scene and all of this sort of thing, which that was all Leicester, right? But I'm entertained by that. I think that works quite well. Also, I've never had a problem with the which again was the Leicester cut, and some of it was used in the Donner cut, but the whole Niagara Falls thing with Lois asking Clark, saying that she thinks Clark and Superman are the same, and her jumping in, because that was almost more discreet in terms of its resolution than the situation in the alternate Donner version, where he jumps out of the Daily Planet and he goes down to the crowded Metropolis street and uses his heat vision to pull the shelter out to break her landing, right? Whereas
we've got to stay away from the Donner cut because it is something we're going to be discussing later. Yeah.
All right, but at least in the
I see what you're.
But at least in the Niagara Falls scene, there's no one else around. So
yeah, totally.
You know what I mean? So again, if I'm intellectualizing this, it kind of makes more sense to me.
I think there's a lot of great points about it. I think they both now stand as interesting curios. Whether you want to say they're disappointing or not, I don't know. I'd be interested actually now to sit and watch Superman 3. And did Lester come back for 4? I can't remember who directed 4.
No, he didn't. No, he returned for 3 because the Soul Kinds produced 3, and then by the time we got to 4, it had been sold to the Canon Group and Golan Global. So and really went down in quality at that point. But
who directed 4? Do you remember?
Oh God, off the top of my head, I can't remember now, which is embarrassing because I should know this.
Hold on, I've got to go off screen for a second because I've got the box. The box is within arm's reach, Keith. I'm going to.
Oh yeah, of course, I've got it. Here.
It's just behind you too.
I don't know whether it's got that. People will be shouting at the screen, I'm sure. Hold on a second.
Okay, there aren't credits in mine. I'm sorry. It's embarrassing. Oh no, hold on. Here we go.
I'm just looking it up now. Superman 4: The Quest.
Oh, Sidney J. Fury.
Oh, Sidney J. Fury. Okay, yeah, fair enough. I mean, it's funny. 3 and 4. There are elements of both that I enjoy, and it's largely because it's Christopher Reeve who. I can't really say anything bad about Christopher Reeve. I just think he was perfect, right, for this, and a great actor in many other things as well, I might point out. But those films for me, tonally and story-wise, were problematic. So I never enjoyed those in the way that I did the first. It's one of many franchises where the first 2 films are great, and then the rest of the series I watch because I'm a fan of the of franchise, but I can pick the others to bits. Whereas the first 2 films kind of work, and I think. To me, there is nothing wrong with the Richard Lester version of Superman 2. And I know I've got friends that will argue with me about that. But for me, I always enjoyed the first 2 movies and kind of everything they did after that, I wasn't so keen on. But yeah,
I think that's a fair kind of assessment, really. But to each their own. I'm sure that the other two movies have their fans as well. It's been an interesting watch for me to look at both of these back to back and just really see the differences and things like that. We will be going slightly more in depth on the Donner cut and how it relates to another recut of a film that was out recently. With Nikki,
one that involves Superman, perhaps.
Yeah, indeed. So we're doing that with Nikki, which should be available sort of hot on the heels of this for the patrons only. If you want to join in and take a look at that, please sign up for the Patreon. You can do that from £2 a month, and that £2 a month will get you all the bonus material that's already on the Patreon, plus it will get you all the upcoming bonus material as well. So we do bonus videos and then podcast versions of those videos for the Patreon. But if not, you can come back and join us for our next video. I don't know what the next one is yet. I'm now at the end of this because I'm filming these all out of order. I'm facing a sort of unknown road of what comes next. We know that the comic show will be coming back with Liz, so that will be Crushing Comics, and that is coming back probably hot on the heels of this, if not out already by the time you watch this, guys. The first new episode of that. Keith, thank you so much. You are going to be back for the Aliens bonus stuff, also for the Patreon, which again you can see. Although
there's another franchise.
Yeah. Well, actually, funny enough, again, I think by the time people are watching this, the Aliens one would have already been on the Patreon. So sorry, guys, I'm getting confused because I'm making these all out of order rather than doing it the way it should be done. It's just the way the scheduling has fallen, unfortunately, in the last few weeks. But Keith, thank you so much for doing this. As always, I really appreciate your incredible knowledge and depth of kind of information that you have going on up there.
Couldn't regret Superman 4 though, could I?
Neither could I. But then maybe it's because deep down we're all trying to forget Superman 4.
Yeah. But no, I mean, I tried to. I appreciated you wanted to focus on the Leicester one, and I tried to stay off Donna as much as I could. But
it is tough though. It is tough because you have to talk about it in relation to now what's been out and what's kind of come down the pipe since then, and it is a tough one to kind of separate, unfortunately. There is a specific reason why we've chosen to separate them as well. Again, when you watch the bonus stuff, if you get to watch that, you'll see why, because Nikki wanted to talk about a very specific area in relation to as I said, the Snyder cut. So we're going to kind of
argue is not quite the same, but hey, that's a whole
yeah, that's very true. It isn't quite the same, but there is a kind of correlation there, and we'll cover that on the special features there. Keith, thank you so much for doing this. People can follow you on Twitter at Home Media Mine. Am I correct?
On Twitter, it's Home Media Mine. Everywhere else, it's at Home Media Minefield. So yes, thank you, Twitter.
Okay.
But or the channel is on YouTube. So
and it is a fantastic channel. I always enjoy watching the videos whenever I can. Keith does great little kind of unboxing videos, but as well as that, he does deep dives into the kind of special features and technical aspects of fairly new releases. You cover some older stuff and newer stuff.
Try and mix it up a bit.
Yeah. And what was your most recent one? Was it Donnie Darko, I think?
No, the most recent one was actually a new release of True Romance. I don't know how new by the time this comes out, but that was that was the last one.
It would have been a couple of weeks old by the time this comes out, but however, definitely. But
I might do something on Superman now, actually, because again, it is a bit of a minefield with the home media Superman, and if you want everything at the moment that's out there, you have to buy multiple releases. Unfortunately, it's just the way it is. You want that TV cut, etc. So, but there's a hugely comprehensive Blu-ray, which is this one that I picked up. that has, if you want to hear more about some of the stories that we've been discussing, assuming people know about it, there are commentaries, documentaries, featurettes, all sorts of an absolute wealth of information about this on that release. So I will perhaps deep dive into that at some point as a tribute to Richard Donner.
Yeah, definitely. It is a loss. It is a loss to filmmaking and a loss to life in general. Really, is a lovely guy. But you know, all things must pass, sadly, and it is definitely sad to see him go. But hopefully these films will live on and people will keep rediscovering them, and we'll get the chance to keep talking about them because they're fantastic things to converse
like you said, 40 years on and we're still talking about it. And I could have probably talked for another hour quite easily. There we go.
It's been great to do this. Thanks, Keith.
Lovely.
Well, I'll see you in a few minutes. Of course, the audience will have already seen you in there. It's a weird sort of going back in time for us as well. We're not turning the earth backwards, though. Keith, thank you so much. Catch Keith on Home Media Minefield on YouTube, at Home Media Mine on Twitter, and at Home Media Minefield on Instagram. Keith, goodbye.
Goodbye for now.